Is the new all-time scoring king, taking the title from Kareem, who held it for nearly 40 years thanks to that incomparable sky hook. LeBron's never had a signature move like that, but he's found a way to consistently dominate by adding different layers to his game. When he entered the league as an 18-year-old, he was an athletic marvel, 6'8" and 240 pounds with a blazing first step and a preternatural feel for how to play the game. And for 19 consecutive seasons, LeBron's averaged at least 25 points per game on better than average true shooting, morphing and evolving as a player while the league radically changed around him. To really understand his longevity as a scorer, let's look at LeBron's first 50-point game all the way back in 2005, the only 60-point game of his career in 2014, and finally his highest scoring game thus far in 2023, a 48-pointer against the Rockets. When he was young, James's combination of speed and size immediately made him a volume scorer. So even in his second season, teams were focused on stopping his penetration game. Jalen Rose doubles away from the ball here. Then he leaves so Chris Bosh can spy on LeBron. There's a third defender taking away the middle, so James goes right and still finishes in traffic. 9 years later, there was a little more space on the floor to attack. 3 teammates are behind the arc, and Bosh is near the three-point line in the corner, so LeBron drives into a pocket to his right, and he's so strong and under control, he can immediately recover for a little putback. Compare that back to the spacing in 2005, where he spins off a screen into a traffic jam because 3 of his teammates are in the paint with no one standing behind the arc. That's essentially the opposite of today's game, where you could drop a New York City apartment between his teammates here, so LeBron charges into that empty space and there's no one there to stop him. He can't jump quite like he used to, but James is still faster than most in a straight line, so he looks to push in transition before the defense can get set. This one is off a make, but when LeBron crosses half court, there's no one back in the lane yet, so he puts his head down and is still stronger than most forwards, and there aren't as many big shot blockers on the floor today to challenge his size at the basket. Also, most players would see a wall of defenders here, but the 20-year veteran knows this defender is going to slide middle, but this defender is sprinting out to the wing, so he cuts it back to the left where there won't be help. LeBron punished Houston by pushing the pace in this game, and according to Synergy, a higher percentage of his scoring today comes in transition than at any other point in his career. This is because the game is faster now, so he can use his north-south athleticism that's still elite, even at 38. A decade ago, the league and the Heat were much slower getting into offense. There was a lot of walking it up like this and methodically waiting for an action to unfold. And the 2005 Cavs played at an even slower pace, which meant more half-court sets where multiple defenders could sit in LeBron's driving gaps, making it harder for him to penetrate. Of course, he was so gifted at 20 that he could attack set defenses with 3 big bodies near the rim. This defender's pulled way over to take away his right hand, so he just explodes left and draws free throws at the basket. In South Beach, the spacing was a little better, but there were still bigger bodies roaming the paint, so LeBron's cyborg athleticism found ways to score around them. There weren't many better players in history at bursting through tight spaces than peak LeBron James. Here's the man himself on that evolution in his career.
First 11, 12 years, I was just super duper athletic, and I can not be as efficient and not be as dialed in on the actual game, basketball game. I can go out and just figure things out once I jumped in the air. My first few years, I knew if I could take off, I was going to be up there a lot longer than you. You was going to land before me. Then I figured out after that.
A 38-year-old LeBron uses tempo and horizontal angles. Instead of exploding to the rim, he takes a huge stride right to hop back left and uses size to shield the ball and finish. When he was younger, it was more full speed ahead, take on all comers, and he lived at the free throw line. About 21% of the points in his entire career have come from the line, whereas today that number is closer to 15%. So you're more likely to see something crafty than a huge highlight dunk, blending his dribble into a soft floating bank shot. That one came after a cut, and LeBron's always had great feel as a cutter for when to dart into little openings. And this was on full display in that 61-point game against the Bobcats down in Miami. Here's a play where he's away from the action, and he knows this middle pick and roll will cause his defender to help in the lane. So as his man moves over, LeBron times a back cut and slips in behind for a layup. He was actually so hot in this game that Charlotte started trapping him at midcourt, so he slows down to relax the defense, then cuts right around him after passing, and nearly finishes this again in traffic before it's offensive goaltending. James actually made his first 8 threes in this one, getting so comfortable that he foreshadowed some of the incredible long range he's used later in his career in LA. Back when he entered the league, LeBron actually struggled with his outside shot.
If you remember when he came out of high school, everybody was questioning whether this young man's going to be able to shoot the ball. If he can make shots, then he can be a great player in this league.
And take a look at his form back then. A big hitch when he jumps, then he holds the ball just to the right of his head and fires. It's subtle, but he holds it up there for a second and actually starts releasing it as he's descending. But 9 years later, his shot was much smoother, bringing the ball up as he jumps and then almost immediately moving it toward the basket instead of pausing. LeBron made 6 threes in that Toronto game, but shot just 33% from downtown in his first 8 seasons. In his 4 years in Miami, that three-point frequency dropped slightly, but his accuracy jumped to 37%. And this was part of a multi-year improvement in his outside shooting that took James from a below-average shooter to an above-average one. 17% of his career points have come from behind the arc, and as a Laker, that number has jumped to 25%, a shift that has helped him immensely in today's spaced-out, shooting-heavy league. Here's something you'd hardly ever see in his salad days, sprinting to the line in transition to pop an early triple. And his outside shooting development wasn't just about threes. LeBron still mixes in mid-range shots to keep defenses on their toes. And in his first 5 years in Cleveland, he made just 36% of his long twos. In Miami, he hit 42% of his twos outside 15 feet. Although around that time, the shot was slowly disappearing from the game, unlike those early Cleveland days where 1/4 of all his field goal attempts were long twos. They actually used to run LeBron off screens from the baseline for long jumpers inside the arc, but those weren't very effective shots, whereas in Miami he could complement his driving game by switching to an under-control mid-ranger when needed. LeBron's even added to this in the last decade, mixing in a one-legged step back in these spots too. So in his first few seasons, LeBron's shot chart was splattered with long twos and a bunch of shots right at the basket. Then during his Heat years, he scored from more high-efficiency spots in the short mid-range, and finally in Los Angeles, he's dominated with a diet of threes and layups. That short-range effectiveness was a byproduct of the post-game he developed in Miami, where he used his size and strength with his back to the basket to carve out easier scoring opportunities. He also flashed his high post skills in this game, flowing from a triple threat position into a spin and then an amazing finish. And I think it's fitting his career high came in Miami, where he combined most of his younger explosiveness with the craft and shooting of those later seasons. LeBron still posts up occasionally today, going to an up and under move late in the Houston game, and they're reminders of just how long this basketball machine has been playing at his own pace and manipulating defenders. Take this spread pick and roll, where he waits for his screener to come flip the angle of the pick so he can go left, just to cross back to his right hand and explode for an and one. A decade later, it's the exact same thing, flipping the screen angle, but this time he keeps it in his left hand so it looks like he's going left, and that hesitation lets him slither back to the right and score. There's one more thing about all his scoring that really blows my mind. He's always been a great passer. LeBron is going to finish his career 4th in assists at worst, and it's amazing to me that someone so willing to hit the open man can still average 27 points per game across 2 decades. And it's only happened because James continued to evolve as a scorer, building off that raw athleticism in Cleveland, adding a post game while mastering his craft and tempo in Miami, and of course, developing his shot while learning every trick in the book over the last decade. So, after more than 2,000 three-point makes, 8,000 made free throws, and nearly 12,000 two-pointers, LeBron James is now officially the new scoring king of the NBA.